In 2007, a school bus carrying 14 students vanished during a routine field trip. No crash, no bodies, no clues. 18 years later, one survivor finds a bracelet in a thrift store, and the truth comes crawling back. What if the bus never left? What if it never could? Before you watch, hit that subscribe button and join the ride. This is the story of the bus that didn't return. Claire Iyer hadn't been back to Delpine, Vermont in almost 7 years. The town was exactly as she remembered, a single blinking street light at the four-way stop, clapboard houses with paint that peeled each winter and tried again every spring, and a gas station that doubled as a diner, and a bulletin board for every lost cat bake sale, and town hall warning her father's house smelled like old wood and lemon floor polish, the kind of smell you only get from a life lived quietly for too long. Claire dumped her duffel by the door and found her father asleep in his recliner, one slipper off the TV, murmuring through closed captions about highway construction. He looked older, thinner too. She pulled the blanket over him gently and went outside, needing air. That's when she saw the thrift store. It wasn't there before. Just across the road from the town's only post office was a squat building with a crooked sign, Second Chances, the kind of place run by retirees and stocked by basement curious. And with nothing better to do before sunset, Claire crossed the street. The bell above the door jingled with sharp cheer. Inside, dust hovered in lazy beams of fading light. A woman in her 60s stood behind the counter, humming along with a cassette tape that warbled Hotel California, new in town. She asked, smiling without really looking. Returning? Claire replied, her voice low. I grew up here. The woman squinted. Family? Ran? Her eyes widened. You're Dan Wren's girl? Claire nodded. CLA. Well, I'll be. The woman said, as if that explained everything. She returned to her humming. Claire wandered the aisles, knitted sweaters, chipped mugs, vintage toys, all the memories nobody wanted anymore. And then she saw it in the jewelry case. Nestled between tangled chains and cracked plastic rings was a silver charm bracelet, small, delicate, with only 3 charms, a music note, a tiny dog, and the letter J. Claire's breath stopped. She knew this bracelet. It belonged to Janie Delcourt. Janie had been her best friend in 7th grade. She sat behind Claire in math, whispered during roll call, and always smelled faintly of cinnamon gum. She was funny insecure about her teeth, and she never took that bracelet off. Except Janie hadn't come back from the trip. Neither had 13 other kids. It had been a school bus trip to Bear Hollow Preserve one bright October morning in 2007, and the bus never returned. No crash, no wreckage, no bodies. They'd called it a tragedy, mechanical failure, possible misdirection, search underway. But after 3 days, the headlines stopped. After a week, the school held a memorial with no photos, just a list of names. And then they never spoke of it again. Claire had been sick that day, fever, strep throat, a lucky illness. She stared at the bracelet for a long time. Where did this come from? She asked the woman behind the counter. This bracelet, it belonged to someone I knew. It was lost. Where'd you get it? The woman blinked, then glanced at the case. Came in a donation box last week. Maybe might have been from the Parsons estate. They're cleaning out their attic. Claire opened her wallet. I'll take it. It's $5. Claire handed her a tin. The woman gave her change with the same vague smile. Back outside, Claire stood under the early evening sky, the bracelet in her palm. It was worn, but intact. The music note charm had a scratch across it. The J was a little bent. She turned it over and froze there. Engraved in faint looping letters on the underside were the initials JD. She sat in her car for nearly 20 minutes, the bracelet clutched in her fist, trying to remember everything she could about that week, about Janie, about the day the bus left and never came back. No one talked about it anymore, not online, not at reunions, and the school board had retired the bus number the following year. She still had the newspaper clippings in a folder back in Boston, buried deep in a drawer labeled avoid, but seeing this, holding it, it wasn't avoidable anymore. This was proof, and proof meant someone had lied. Claire looked out across the road at her childhood home. Her father was probably still asleep. The town hadn't changed, but something inside her had. She reached for her phone and opened a new note. Missing October 2007, Bear Hollow field trip, 14 students, 1 teacher, no return, no crash site. Claire ran absent due to illness. Janie Delcourt was one of them. Her bracelet just turned up in a thrift store. Claire closed the note and looked at the bracelet again. Janie didn't give things away, and she sure as hell didn't come home to return a bracelet no one else could have had. The past wasn't gone. It had just been quiet, and Claire was about to make it loud. Claire stood outside the old middle school the next morning, her car idling, as she stared at the building like it was a puzzle she'd forgotten how to solve. It hadn't changed much. Same sagging roof, same front sign, with letters missing. Welcome me to LPA, my deal school. The hedges were trimmed now, but the rusted bike rack still leaned at the same awkward angle, and the flagpole chain clinked faintly in the morning breeze. 14 kids had left this building in 2007 and never come back. Claire turned off the ignition and stepped out, the bracelet tucked in her coat pocket. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Janie's face, or at least the way her memory had preserved it. Freckles, laughter, the wide grin, with one crooked tooth. She had questions now, and she needed answers that weren't just rumors and archived obituaries. The school's front office was surprisingly modern inside, fluorescent lights, fresh linoleum, and a digital check-in system. The receptionist looked up from her computer with a forced smile. "Can I help you? I'm Claire Ran. I used to attend here, class of 2008. My dad's Dan Ran. He taught shop class." The woman perked up. "Oh, Mr. Ran, yeah, he retired a few years back. How's he doing?" Slowing down, Claire said, "I'm helping out while he recovers from surgery." "Well, welcome back. What can we do for you?" Claire hesitated. "Actually, I was hoping to take a look at some old yearbooks, maybe records from around 2007. The woman tilted her head. "What for?" "I'm writing something." Claire lied. "Personal project. I was out sick during the field trip." "The one where, well, you know," the receptionist's expression tightened. "We don't really keep that stuff anymore. There was an audit a few years ago, cleared out a lot of old records." Claire raised an eyebrow. "An audit?" "Yeah, the board had a compliance review, updated privacy protocols, and all that." She tapped her nails against the desk, then leaned in slightly. "You're looking for someone specific?" Claire paused. "Janie Dell Cord. She was my best friend." The woman's face fell. She glanced around, then lowered her voice. "Sweet girl, that whole thing, it was awful. We weren't even allowed to hold a real memorial in here. The board didn't want the younger kids scared." "I found something of hers," Claire said, pulling the bracelet from her coat pocket, "in a thrift store. I think it was hers." "I know it was." The woman stared at it. "That's, yes, she used to wear that every day. I remember the little music note." Claire nodded. "How did it end up in a donation bin?" The woman didn't answer. "Do you have any files at all?" Claire asked. "Anything from that year?" "I don't need addresses or private data, just names, lists, photos. There's a storage cabinet in the back," the woman said slowly. "Mostly old yearbooks, a few boxes of past student directories. If you want to take a look, I can let you back there for a few minutes." Claire tried not to look too eager. "That'd be amazing, thank you." She followed the receptionist through a side door into a narrow hallway that smelled faintly of dry erase markers and cafeteria pizza. They passed a locked teacher's lounge and came to a gray metal cabinet beside a fire extinguisher. "Nothing's in order," the woman warned, "but you're welcome to dig." Claire opened the cabinet and crouched inside were dusty binders, file boxes, and yearbooks wrapped in yellowed plastic. She found the 2006 to 2007 yearbook and pulled it out, flipping quickly to the 7th grade section. There she was, Janie Delcourt, smiling, her hair in twin braids, her smile wide and unaware of what was coming. Claire stared for a moment, then reached for the student directory, a typed list of homerooms, and assigned bus numbers. She flipped through the pages, eyes scanning for anything unusual. Bus 7, bus 14, bus 18, and there it was: failed trip, October 12, 2007. Bus 12, teacher Mr. Alan Bear. Students list redacted. The names had been blacked out, every single one. Claire felt her throat tighten. There were faint imprints beneath the redacted ink, signs the names had once been there. Someone had gone through this file by hand and censored it. She reached for her phone and took a photo of the page. "You find what you were looking for?" the receptionist called from down the hall. Claire slid the yearbook back into place and stood sort of back outside. Claire sat in her car, staring at the photo on her phone. The redacted names, the teacher's name, Alan Baird. She didn't remember him. Well, he'd only taught that year. She opened a browser and searched for his name. Nothing, no social media, no obituaries, no teaching credentials in Vermont's online certification database. It was like he'd never existed. Claire felt her chest tighten. The bracelet hadn't been a fluke. The redactions weren't an accident. Someone had gone to great lengths to make sure there was no record of the students who boarded that bus. She opened her note again and added, "Bus 12 assigned to Mr. Alan Baird. Student list redacted. No public record of Bear. Post 2007. Janie's bracelet surfaced in 2025. Someone is hiding something." Claire looked back at the school. It wasn't just silence, it was erasure, and someone had pulled the black marker over the past on purpose. The old bus route wasn't on any modern maps. Claire discovered that the hard way after 2 hours of scrolling through archived town council PDFs and long-forgotten newsletters in the library's microfic room. But persistence paid off, and eventually, she found a scanned flyer for the 2007 Bear Hollow field trip itinerary, emailed to parents on October 10th. Departure 7:45 a.m. Delpine Middle School. Estimated arrival 8:30 a.m. Bear Hollow Preserve via Route 6A to Deer Path Trail. The school had said the bus likely veered off the main road. Authorities blamed poor signage and unreliable GPS in the mountains. But if that were true, Claire thought someone should have found something, a crash site, a tire tread, something. She printed the flyer and drove to the edge of town, where Route 6A began, a winding two-lane road that cut through dense forest. The sky had gray by the time she reached the junction with Deer Path Trail. The sign was still there, though half-rotted and nearly swallowed by ivy. She parked the car off the road, engine idling in the cold, and stared at the trail. It was barely a trail now, just a gravel ribbon vanishing into the trees. No recent tire marks, no maintenance, no welcome sign for Bear Hollow. Claire checked her phone, no signal. She hesitated for a beat, then grabbed her coat and flashlight. There was no clear destination, but she needed to walk the path herself, needed to feel it, retrace the ride Janie and the others had taken. The woods were quiet, too quiet. She followed the path for 20 minutes, stepping over fallen branches and leaves half mulched by spring rain. Eventually, the trail forked. One path was marked private, no trespassing. The other was unmarked and overgrown. Claire picked the unmarked one. After another 10 minutes, she reached a clearing wide and flat, ringed by pine. The grass here was brittle, like it hadn't grown properly in years. There were no benches, no welcome signs, no evidence of a preserve, just a metal pole sticking out of the ground like the neck of a broken street lamp, and something else, a concrete slab sunken and cracked. It looked like the foundation of a building. Long removed moss grew around the edges, and something dark had stained one corner. Claire knelt near the base of the slab. Barely visible beneath the dirt and grime was a number carved into the concrete: BHP 27, Bear Hollow Preserve Installation 27. She stood and took several photos, then backed away. Something about the place felt wrong, hollow like the air itself. Remembered something no one else did. She turned to head back and saw the man watching her. He stood at the edge of the clearing, half hidden by a tree, middle-aged, wearing a heavy coat, a shovel in one hand. They locked eyes, and Claire froze. "Are you lost?" the man called out. Claire kept her voice steady. "Just hiking. Trail's closed." His voice was gruff, but not aggressive. "I didn't see a sign." He stepped forward. "Nobody's supposed to be back here. It's dangerous." Claire nodded slowly. "I'm Claire Iyer. I used to live here. I'm looking into the Bear Hollow disappearance." The man stopped cold. "I was sick that day," she continued. "I should have been on that bus." A long silence passed. The man's expression softened slightly. "My name's Tom Granger," he said. "I was a volunteer on the search team back then." Claire's pulse quickened. "Did you find anything?" He shook his head. "Not officially. But what?" Tom looked around, then jerked his chin toward the trees. "You want to talk? Not here." They walked in silence for 10 minutes until they reached a rusted pickup truck parked near a collapsed fence. Tom unlocked the passenger door and gestured for her to sit. He lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. "They told us to stop," he said finally. "After the third day, the state pulled resources. The Fed said it was a lost cause." Claire leaned in. "Did you see the bus?" "No," he said, "but we saw tracks, just one set going off the main path. And the next morning they were gone, washed out like someone hosed them down. We were told not to mention it." Claire stared at him. "Why?" Tom looked tired. "Because Bear Hollow wasn't just a preserve, not in the 80s. It was a decommissioned testing site, chemical, psychological, maybe both. They shut it down officially in 89, but I don't think they ever stopped using it." Claire thought of the concrete slab. "BHP 27, that mean anything to you?" He flinched. "Yeah, BHP was the code for Bear Hollow. Project 27 was one of the building's storage or containment. I think for what." Tom crushed the cigarette out. "Nobody ever said, but I do remember this. When the bus disappeared, no distress call ever came in. The transponder on that bus just stopped pinging, like someone cut the signal mid-trip." Claire sat back. "And one more thing," Tom added. "A week later, the school board sealed all personnel files for that year. Said it was to protect staff privacy." Claire's mind was racing. "Do you remember the teacher, Mr. Bed?" Tom nodded slowly. "Yeah, new guy, quiet, didn't make friends. After the bus went missing, he didn't show up to the debriefing. No one ever saw him again, not even in town." "Nope, just gone." Claire pulled out her phone and showed him the photo of the redacted bus list. He nodded grimly. "Looks about right. Why hasn't anyone talked about this?" Tom looked at her, eyes heavy, "Because nobody wanted to believe it, and the ones who did, they stopped asking." Claire swallowed hard. Not her. She wasn't stopping. Claire wasn't paranoid, not really. But when the same silver pickup truck appeared behind her twice in the span of 20 minutes on Main Street, she started paying attention. She turned on a Grange Hill Road, then quickly veered off into the Delp Pine Library parking lot. The truck kept driving. Probably nothing, probably someone else taking the same Shortcut twice, but in Delpine that was rare. Back inside the library, the warmth and silence greeted her like a friend who didn't ask questions. The place smelled like paper and would polish exactly as she remembered. Claire hadn't been here since 8th grade, and even then only once to study for a science test. Janie never got to take. The librarian was new, mid-30s, glasses, earbuds, and she barely looked up as Claire moved toward the local history section in the back. She'd come for two things: the archived town council minutes and any documentation about Bear Hollow's former use before it became a nature preserve. The archives room was small and dimly lit, filled with plastic tubs, yellowed newspapers, and fading binders. Claire found the town council records in a filing cabinet marked 1970 to 2010. She started in 2007. The October meetings, dated days after the disappearance, were missing pages torn out. Her heart skipped. She checked the index and saw minutes listed for every other week that year only. October 15th and 22nd were gone. Coincidence? She flipped backward, scanning earlier meetings from August and September. Approval to renew restricted lease with Department of Environmental Testing. Bear Hollow parcel BHP 27, parcel BHP 27, the same code on the concrete slab. Claire snapped a photo. The next entry chilled her. Temporary access granted to third-party research observers under non-disclosure agreement. No public access permitted until November 1st. She took another photo and closed the folder carefully, her fingers trembling slightly. If Bear Hollow had been leased to a government contractor or research group, the field trip never should have happened, and someone made sure that detail vanished with the bus back at the front desk. The librarian finally looked up. Find everything? Claire nodded absently. Do you have any archived newspapers from that week in October 2007? The Delpine Courier. The librarian tilted her head. Sure, but a bunch of local editions from that fall were water damaged a few years back. Flood in the basement. We had to toss most of them. Claire wasn't surprised. Still, she asked to see what was left. They had one issue, October 9th, 2007, the last edition before the field trip. On page 3, wedged between an ad for propane and a bake sale announcement, was a short notice: Delpine Middle School to resume Bear Hollow field trip after hiatus following a 3-year pause. The annual trip to Bear Hollow Preserve will resume this Friday. The site was closed during cleanup efforts, but has since been deemed safe by the town council. Claire reread the line 3 times. 3-year pause. No one had ever mentioned that she left the library with copies of everything she could get. As she walked to her car, an elderly man with a dog gave her a long, measuring look. You're Wren's girl, he said flatly. Claire stopped. Excuse me. Dan, Wren's daughter. Claire, you're the one digging up the old ghosts. His tone wasn't friendly, just trying to understand what happened. She said you don't need to. The man muttered. Nothing's going to change. You stir it up, all you do is wake the wrong people. He turned and walked off, dog in tow. Claire stood there a moment longer, heart hammering. Back at her dad's house, she brewed coffee and spread everything across the kitchen table: the photos from the town records, the council minutes, the concrete slab, and the article. She pulled out her notebook. Investigation log. BHP 27 was leased to an unnamed entity weeks before the field trip. October town council minutes are missing. Bear Hollow had been closed for 3 years before the 2007 trip. School board didn't disclose this to parents. Mr. Bear disappeared after the trip. Janie's bracelet surfaced in a public thrift store in 2025. She circled one word. Why? Her phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. You're asking dangerous questions. Let it go. Claire's fingers went cold. She stared at the message, then looked up at her father's old metal filing cabinet in the hallway. He had worked at the school. He'd taught shop there for over a decade. He might not have known what happened, but he knew the staff. She got up and opened the cabinet. Most of it was old receipts, lesson plans, broken mechanical pencils, and worn photos. But near the bottom, she found a folder labeled Personnel 2007. Inside was a list of staff assignments by department. She flipped through until she found Alan Baird, interim science teacher, hired September 2007, terminated October 2007. No forwarding address, no resignation letter, just a stamp. File closed. Do not pursue. Claire stared at it for a long time, then pulled out her phone. She opened her search engine. Alan Baird, Vermont teaching license. No results. Alan Baird, missing persons 2007. Nothing. Alan Baird, Bear Hollow, Delpine. One result, a cached forum post on a now defunct message board. I saw a guy matching his photo outside Bear Hollow in '08. Looked messed up, like he hadn't slept in weeks. When I asked if he needed help, he just said, they're not gone there underneath. Claire clicked the thread page. Not found. Claire wasn't sure if she expected the Department of Transportation to actually return her call, But at 9:42 a.m. the next morning her phone lit up with an unfamiliar Vermont government number. She took a breath, answered. "This is Claire. Hi, this is Drew Langley from Vermont State. Do you left a message asking about school bus GPS records from 2007? That's right, specifically bus 12 from Delpine Middle School, October 12th. 2007. Langley cleared his throat. Those records aren't exactly easy to find. That system was pretty new back then. Not all buses had it. Yet Claire hesitated. Did bus 12 have it? According to our archived inventory, yes. That fleet was upgraded in 2006. Bus 12 had a basic transponder. It pinged location data every 5 minutes. Claire's pulse quickened. Is there still data from that day? Langley paused. That's the weird part. The GPS unit transmitted normally until 8:14 a.m., about 20 minutes before it should have reached Bear Hollow. Then it stopped. How, like someone cut the power or the unit was removed? Last ping came from just past the Deer Path Trail fork. Claire opened her laptop and pulled up a satellite map. Could you send me the coordinates of that last ping? Sure, I can email you a screenshot. But one more thing, what there was a second signal. Another unit briefly picked up something at 3:17 a.m. the following morning. Same model, same ID, but this time from a location 15 miles north near a defunct rail station. Claire blinked. How's that possible? Langley exhaled. It shouldn't be. We logged it as a glitch, but well, glitches don't usually change location like that. He emailed the details while Claire stared at the screen, stunned. Two pings, one where the bus should have gone missing, the second hours later, nowhere near the route. She clicked the file. The final coordinates resolved into a grainy satellite image, a Rylard long since overtaken by trees with a narrow access road and a rusted shed still visible from above. Claire searched the address. No street view, no local references. The only mention was from a 1981 zoning permit granting rail companies access for emergency depot functions, emergency depot, or a transfer point. She stared at the image, trees, shadows, forgotten space. If the GPS unit was reactivated there, even briefly, it might mean the bus wasn't destroyed, it had been moved, and someone had tried to make it disappear. She didn't tell anyone where she was going, not her father, not Tom Granger, not even Jeanette, the clerk at Town Hall who occasionally replied to her late-night questions with PDF scans of council filings. She drove out past the old mill, past where the pavement ended and the gravel crunched beneath her tires. Her phone lost signal again. Around mile 10, the Rylard emerged behind a curtain of pine trees. A sagging chain-link gate had long since collapsed inward, and the tracks were rusted over half. Swallowed by moss, the shed still stood, a rectangular building with flaking paint and no visible windows. Claire parked on the edge and approached on foot. The air smelled of rust and damp soil. The shed's door was unlocked. Inside, dust, decay, and emptiness, except for tire tracks, faint old. But there she followed them across the concrete floor until they disappeared beneath a trap door sealed shut with rusted bolts. A chain had once looped through the metal latch, but had been snapped clean, leaving a twisted length dangling. Claire took photos, then turned to leave. That's when she heard it, a soft crack, branches breaking behind her. She froze, footsteps, 1, 2, crunching across the gravel outside the shed. She stepped silently to the side of the door, pressing her back to the wall, heart pounding, hands slick with sweat. The footsteps paused, then a low, growly voice. "You shouldn't be here." Claire didn't recognize it. Male, older, deliberate. She said nothing. The footsteps moved on, fading. Whoever it was didn't come inside, just lingered long enough to let her know she wasn't alone and that someone was watching back at her car. Claire drove fast. Her tires kicked up gravel and sent birds scattering from the treetops. She didn't stop until she reached town limits. She pulled into a gas station and checked her phone. Still no signal. She opened her laptop and loaded the photos, the snap chain, the faint tire marks, the inside of the shed. Then she uploaded everything to a private backup folder titled Field Trip. Restricted access. She added a new note to her log. GPS findings last confirmed ping 8:14 a.m. near Bear Hollow. Unexpected ping 3:17 a.m. 15 miles north at Old Rylard. Rylard shows signs of vehicle movement and a trap door. Someone was there today. Unknown male, possibly watching. Site. She leaned back in the seat, heart still racing. If the bus had been moved and the GPS signal reactivated briefly, it meant at least part of the vehicle had survived, but the school board never said a word. No one had followed that signal, or worse, someone had, and made sure it went nowhere. The next place on Claire's list wasn't in any official report. It was a gas station just 2 miles down the road from where Bus 12's GPS had cut out on October 12, 2007. It was called Pine Top, a squat brick building with a faded sign and only 2 working pumps, the kind of place where time felt like it had stopped sometime in the late 90s. Claire pulled in around noon, noting the small, outdated security camera mounted just above the front door. It looked dusty but functional. The man behind the counter was about 70 with white stubble and eyes that narrowed the moment Claire walked in. Pumps broken. Credit only. I'm not here for gas, Claire said gently. I'm looking into something that happened years ago. Then you're wasting your time. He muttered, eyes back on the lottery tickets he was scratching. She took a photo from her coat pocket and slid it across the counter, an old yearbook image of Janie Deller. The man's eyes flicked toward it. She came through here, Claire said, or maybe the bus did. October 12th, 2007, early morning. I don't remember, kids, he said too quickly. Claire didn't buy it. There was a bus. It stopped briefly. It would have shown up on your surveillance system. He stared at her a long moment. Then with a sigh he said, I didn't say there wasn't a tape. Her pulse quickened. You still have it. I shouldn't, but you do. He grunted and ducked behind the counter, emerging with a small, dusty box labeled Cam Backup 2007. Claire stared. You kept it. I was told to erase everything after that week. Power outage did half the job, but this one tape got jammed in the system, never recycled. He slid it across the counter toward her. It's VHS. Good luck finding a player. Claire took it carefully. What's on it? He shrugged. A school bus pulling into the lot around 8:10 a.m. Driver gets out, checks the hood, doesn't go inside, stays parked 5 minutes, then leaves the wrong way, not toward the preserve, toward the back road, the one they were supposed to avoid. Claire's heart hammered. Do you know who the driver was? Didn't recognize him, but he was wearing the wrong jacket, not Delpine school colors, looked like a windbreaker, plain black. What happened when you told someone? I didn't. He met her eyes. Because a man came in the next day, said he was with the school board, asked about tapes, told me not to share them. I didn't like how calm he was. You didn't turn it in. He nodded at the tape. That is me turning it in. Claire left Pine Top with the VHS clutched tightly, heart pounding like it would crack her ribs. She drove straight to the only person she knew who might have a working VHS player, Margaret Harker, her father's former colleague, a retired teacher who had taught at Delpine during the 2007 incident. Claire hadn't spoken to her in years, but she remembered that Margaret had been one of the only teachers who publicly questioned the school board's official story. Claire rang the bell on her cottage door. Margaret answered, wearing a cardigan and holding a mug of tea. Claire ran. She said flatly, took you long enough. I found something. Claire said, I need your help. Margaret's living room was a time capsule, shelves of annotated classics, cross-stitched wall hangings, and a cabinet filled with obsolete media players. You still use? Claire asked. Margaret raised an eyebrow. The classics don't stream. They sat on the worn couch. The old TV buzzed to life, and Margaret inserted the tape. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. A yellow bus pulled into frame, parking crookedly by the pumps. That's it, Claire whispered. Bus 12. They watched as the driver stepped out. He wasn't a teacher, not anyone Claire recognized. Tall, wiry, wearing a black jacket, not a school uniform. He didn't open the door for the students. He opened the hood, checked something, then walked to the side of the bus for a few seconds. He turned toward the camera. Margaret inhaled sharply. That's not a driver, that's Alan Baird. Claire turned. You're sure? I remember that face. He wasn't supposed to drive that day. He wasn't certified. He was just a temp hire. He taught science. Barely on the tape. Baird climbed back into the driver's seat. The bus reversed out, not toward the preserve, but toward the side access road. Claire paused the tape. This changes everything, she whispered. He didn't just vanish, he took them. Claire's investigation log updated. Bus 12 was last seen on Pine Top. Footage at 8:10 a.m. Alan Baird was driving, not a certified bus driver, wore unmarked clothing, no school ID visible. Bus diverted from assigned route toward unmonitored back road. School board rep told station owner to erase the footage. Tape was secretly preserved. Bear was complicit. Claire stood from the couch, heart racing. Margaret sipped her tea slowly. What are you going to do with this? Everything, Claire said. I'm going to find out where that road leads and what it leads to. The back road Alan Baird had taken, the one visible in the VHS tape, didn't appear on modern GPS. Claire had to overlay 2006 county zoning maps with a faded copy of the original Bear Hollow Trail guide to trace it. It was called Gravel Spur, an old maintenance road used by forestry crews decades earlier, now technically inactive, but it hadn't always been, and she suspected it led to the heart of everything. Claire packed lightly, flashlight, her notebook, a backup battery, and the bracelet, the one Janie never should have left behind. She parked at the Pine stop again, this time locking her car more tightly than usual, and hiked up the trail to where Gravel Spur split off into the woods. The moment She crossed the tree and the temperature dropped, branches curled low overhead, turning daylight into dull gray haze. There were no tire marks, no signs of recent foot traffic, but the path was still there, beaten down by time not completely reclaimed. Claire walked for nearly an hour. She passed a collapsed gate. Then a rusted sign bent sideways, property of U.S. Environmental Testing, no entry, the Bear Hollow Project. She stepped beyond the sign. That's when she saw the structure, half buried in moss and earth. Concrete walls jutted up from the forest floor like the rib cage of a dead animal. The entrance was a narrow stairwell, its door long gone. Painted on the frame in cracked red was a number, BHP 27. Claire descended slowly, flashlight in hand. The air grew colder, thicker. Every step echoed in the narrow stairwell. Swallowed by silence, at the bottom was a metal hallway, narrow with peeling paint and exposed pipes. She was in the remains of the Bear Hollow facility. She passed faded signs, interview room, a storage, medical observation chamber. Then she found the room. It had no label. The door was ajar inside. The floor was stained. A child-sized chair was bolted to the ground with a broken strap hanging from one side. A viewing window was cracked and fogged with mildew. In the corner, a chalkboard still clung to the wall with 3 words faintly visible beneath smudges. She said, "Wait." Claire swallowed hard. On the floor was something small and metal. She crouched and picked it up, a charm, a music note, just like the one on Janie's bracelet. She checked her pocket. Janie's bracelet was intact. This was a second one. Her mind reeled. Had Janie ever even left this place? She stumbled back, heart hammering, and nearly screamed as her flashlight flickered, then cut out completely. Total blackness. She fumbled for her phone and switched on the flashlight app. It barely cut through the dark, but enough to see the wall ahead of her. There were names scratched into the paint, dozens. Some were legible, some weren't. Natalie B.J. Delcourt, E. Thomas K. Mendes. No one leaves. Not really. They listen, they wait. Underneath, Claire backed away. The flashlight flickered again. Something was wrong with the air. Too heavy, too still. She turned to leave. A sound stopped her, faint, metallic, like chains shifting on concrete. Not imagination, not memory. Something else was down there. She ran. Claire didn't stop until she reached her car. Her clothes were damp with sweat, her hands shaking too hard to fit the key into the ignition. On the first try, she finally turned the engine over and sped down the road, gravel spraying behind her. Once she was back in town, she parked in front of the diner and just sat there, breathing. She pulled out the charm. It was scratched, burnt along one edge, not fresh, not recent, but not ancient either. Someone had been there recently, someone who still remembered Janie, or wanted her to be remembered. She opened her notebook and wrote in block letters across a clean page, BHP 27. Field notes, underground facility, still intact. Interview chambers exist. Restraint chair present. Names carved into wall, possibly other students. Music note, charm found not the same as Janie's bracelet. Chalkboard message. She said, "Wait." Chains heard no explanation. Then she circled one name, J. Delcourt. Janie had made it there. But had she ever left? Claire couldn't shake the sound. Chains on concrete. It looped in her mind like a haunted echo. She tried to rationalize. It may be something shifting overhead or the building settling. But deep down she didn't believe that. It felt personal, too precise. The name scratched into the wall, J. Delcourt, had confirmed what her gut already knew. Janie had never left Bear Hollow. Claire needed a second opinion, someone who had been there, someone who had seen something before the silence set in. She remembered a name that had come up in one of her dad's old files, Ray Alvarez, a substitute bus driver who had filled in occasionally during the 2007 to 2008 school year. There had been a sticky note on his personnel record, reassigned, no further use. After B12 incident, paid out, no one paid out substitute. She tracked him down through a mutual friend of her dad's, a retired mechanic named Pete, who still played poker on Thursdays with Ray from Depot 3. It only took one phone call. Claire drove an hour north to a trailer park near Rutland where Ray now lived. His porch sagged, and a wind chime, made from spoons, clinked lazily in the afternoon breeze. He opened the door, shirtless, eyes blurry, but alert. "You're Ren's kid." "I am," Claire said. "Claire." He nodded, motioning her inside. Without a word, the trailer was cramped, but clean old furniture, a TV with aluminum foil on the antenna, and a plastic tub full of crossword puzzle books. Ray cracked open a beer and offered her one. She declined. "So," he said, settling into his chair, "you're asking about the bus." She pulled the VHS tape photo from her satchel, the one showing Alan Baird driving. "Did you know him?" Ree squinted at the image. "Yeah, Baird, weird guy, hired out of nowhere, not union. They stuck him on rotation last minute. That was always fishy." Claire leaned forward. "Did he normally drive?" "Nope. He wasn't even on the driver roster. That bus 12 was assigned to Dale Marks, a vet with 10 years behind the wheel, but the morning of the trip Dale's shift got canceled, called and told not to show. Claire blinked by. Who retapped his beer can. That's the thing, he never found out. It didn't come from dispatch, just a voicemail from a block number said he'd been replaced, and no one followed up. Ree shook his head. He raised hell, went to the union, but then they paid him off, said it was a miscommunication. They reassigned him to training in mail quietly, and Baird never saw him again. After that week, no one did, not even at the depot. I asked around, some said he wasn't even living in town, just driving in from a hotel. Claire stared at him. So someone planted him. Yeah, Ree said, taking a sip. Someone who wanted a specific driver on that bus on that day. Ray scratched his jaw and glanced toward a cabinet. Hold on, he stood and returned a minute later with an old clipboard wrapped in plastic. I shouldn't have kept this, but I didn't trust what was going on. Claire looked down at the sheet attached to it, a driver assignment roster for October 12, 2007, handwritten, initial bus 12 reassigned to a Bear C, directive no AM check. In required. Why wouldn't he check in? Claire asked. Exactly. Ree said we all had to clock in record mileage, do safety checks. Baird skipped it, which means he wasn't part of the system. Claire took a photo. Ray looked at her with something between sadness and fear. You think those kids are still out there? I think the truth is still out there, she said, and someone spent 15 years trying to bury it. Ree nodded slowly. Then you'd better hurry, because I'm pretty sure whoever set this up, they're still around. Later that night, Claire sat in her father's garage with all the evidence spread before her: yearbook photos, the thrift store bracelet, the redacted student list, GPS pings, the VHS tape still in its box, and now proof that the driver was a plant. She wrote across a clean page in her notebook: driver evidence, bus 12 originally assigned to Dale Marks. Dale was removed via anonymous call. Alan Baird assigned with no check-in record. Bard's address, Dar, employment not verifiable. Sub driver Ray Alvarez confirmed system was bypassed. School board covered up driver change. She stared at the line she'd just written. Covered up. This wasn't negligence, it was orchestrated, and it was time to go back to Bear Hollow one last time, because whatever they'd done to Janie and the others, it hadn't started on the trail, it started on the bus. Claire didn't sleep. She tried, but the walls of her childhood bedroom, once filled with posters and books, felt too close, too loud with the weight of silence. At 2:13 a.m., she gave up and sat in the garage with a notebook in her lap, the bracelet on the table, and the names spinning in her head like static. There were 14 of them, 14 kids, and one teacher, if that's what Alan Baird had really been. She had their names, she had photos, she had a VHS tape showing the bus turning off the assigned road. But what she didn't have, what she still needed, was a direct link to whoever had orchestrated it, someone powerful enough to shut down the investigation, bury the personnel files, and erase entire records. She stared at the school board letterhead she'd scanned earlier that week: Mornington Educational Trust, and one name stood out: E. Rutherford. She'd signed every file closure order from 2007 to 2010. Her name was on the audit that erased the student list, and her address had been redacted in the town's public registry, but old printed directories, those couldn't be edited retroactively. Claire drove to the Mornington Library as the sun was just cresting over the trees. It opened at 8 o'clock. She was on the steps at 7:59, bouncing her foot impatiently. The reference librarian, Jeanette, 40, something blurry-eyed, coffee in hand, was startled but not unfriendly. Claire recognized her from the town hall office. Jeanette blinked when Claire gave her the name. Elena Rutherford, she repeated. I haven't heard that one in years. She's still on the Mornington Educational Trust Board, Claire said. Or at least her name is. She doesn't attend meetings. Everything's remote now. But yes, she's still around, has a private estate on Woodpine Lane near the reservoir. Can I see her old listings? Jeanette raised an eyebrow. You doing a school project, something like that? After a few minutes, she returned with a 2006 town register. Claire scanned the page and found it. Rutherford Eleanor, M. 48. Woodpine Lane, retired psychologist, former school administrator, psychologist. Claire jotted it down. Did she ever work with students? She asked. Jeanette nodded. Counseled kids back in the 80s, then moved into board oversight, always behind the scenes, quiet. Claire thought of the quote Ray Alvarez had given her: you'd better hurry, whoever set this up is still around. It had to be her. That evening, after printing everything she had into a single file marked field evidence Greystone incident, Claire returned to her father's house. The front gate was open. That was strange. She hadn't left it that way. Her keys slid quietly into her palm as she approached the front steps. The porch light was off. The screen door swayed gently in the wind. Inside, the living room light was on. Her father was asleep in the recliner again, Or so she thought until she saw the blood. Dad. Claire dropped the folder and ran to him. Not much blood, a cut above the eyebrow. His glasses were broken. He stirred him. What? Dad, wake up. What happened? He blinked blurrily. Don't remember. Someone knocked. Thought it was Pete. Next thing, someone's in the house. Did you see their face? He shook his head slowly. No woman. I think small fast took something. Claire's heart dropped. She ran to the kitchen, where she'd left her satchel on the table, open half emptied. The VHS tape was still there, but the notebook was gone. Her backup USB gone. The original bracelet gone. Whoever had come wasn't just sending a warning, they were covering tracks. She stayed awake all night, documenting everything she remembered into a fresh file. At dawn, a white envelope appeared on the porch. No stamp, no address, just her name. Claire. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Stop digging. You're not just stirring the past, you're walking into it. There's still time to leave, but not much. There was a drawing on the back, a child's sketch in black crayon, a bus, a forest, and below it a figure in the trees with no face. Claire's investigation log addendum. My home was entered. Items stolen. Primary notes, bracelet, USB, timeline, sketches. Intruder left no trace. Father mildly injured. Drawing left behind suggests surveillance. Threat not idle. They know who I am and where I live. Claire looked at the message one more time. You're not just stirring the past, you're walking into it. It wasn't a warning, it was a map, and the next place it pointed was Eleanor Rutherford's estate, because whoever this woman had been in 1979, she wasn't just a board member, she had been inside Bear Hollow, and Claire needed to know what she saw. Claire parked a /4 mile down from 48 Wood Pine Lane, killing her lights as the sun slid behind the trees. Eleanor Rutherford's estate was barely visible from the road, tucked behind a wrought iron gate and choked by creeping ivy. The house itself looked more like a forgotten sanitarium than a private residence. It was quiet, too quiet. No cars, no porch lights, no dogs barking, just the creak of wind through branches and the soft rattle of something metallic. Hanging from the rear gate, Claire crouched beside the fence line, pressed record on her phone, and whispered. May 28th, 9:07 p.m. Approaching residence of Eleanor Rutherford. Strong link to Mornington Educational Trust and the Bear Hollow Project. Unknown risk level. She found a gap in the fence where rust had eaten through the links and slipped inside. The house loomed above her, tall and narrow, its siding cracked like dried skin. Every instinct screamed for her to turn around, but she didn't. She was too far and now too close. She crossed the gravel quietly, avoiding the front door, and made for the side entrance. A sunroom with shattered panes and a door propped open with a stone inside. The air was stale, almost chemical. Claire swept her light across the room. Stacks of paperwork, medical files, half-burned photographs. A faint hum buzzed from somewhere deeper in the house, mechanical and low. She passed into the main hallway, and the smell hit her, disinfectant and something metallic underneath. She stepped into what once must have been a sitting room, but this wasn't just a home, it was an archive. Folders, cassette tapes, black and white photos pinned to corkboards. The wall was covered in sketches, some drawn with precision, some with the manic swirl of a disturbed hand. Children's names, drawings of the bus, dates, times, scribbled numbers, and one word repeated over and over underneath. Claire approached the central desk. An old Realtor tape recorder sat at its center, still functional, labeled session 47 bhp/JD. She pressed play. A girl's voice crackled through the machine, small, afraid, familiar. I don't want to go back in the room, please. I told you everything. A second voice, calm, female, clinical. What did you hear last time? Janie. Silence. Then it's in the floor, it hums, it talks. When we sleep, it said we shouldn't leave, that it's hungry, and the other's gone. Some in the dark room. But it's not their fault. You opened it, Janie. What did you see? A long pause. The bus never moved. You just made it feel like it did. The tape clicked off. Claire stepped back, breath tight. It wasn't a field trip. It was an experiment. In the corner of the room, a cabinet sat open. Inside, patient files, medical intake forms, all labeled with BHP case numbers. Claire flipped through and froze at one marked BHP 12. JD Delcourt, Janie, age 12, subject 6, photos, vitals, drawings, notes, displays high auditory sensitivity, speaks of bus. Beneath the bus, expresses dissociation, temporal dislocation, records, altered sleep cycles, told others. We're in a loop, we never left. At the bottom, a signature, Eleanor M. Rutherford, PhD, lead clinical observer, BHP. Claire felt sick. This wasn't about a missing bus. This was a psychological field test conducted on children. On Janie, and Baird hadn't been a teacher, he'd been a handler. Then a sound upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Claire froze hard in her throat. She grabbed her phone, snuffed her light, and ducked behind the desk. A silhouette passed across the top stairs, slow, deliberate, a figure, tall, moving like they knew the space, not Rutherford too big, she waited, breath shallow. The figure reached the hallway and paused just outside the room. Claire gripped the drawer handle of the desk slowly and tugged it open, metal groaning, a handgun, small, rusted, but loaded. She stayed low. Then, just as suddenly as they'd appeared, the figure turned and walked away out the back, not toward the front door. Claire waited until the footsteps faded, then bolted. She stuffed the tape, Janie's file, and the bus sketches into her bag and ran like hell back through the trees. She didn't stop until she was back in the car, hands shaking as she pulled the door closed and locked it. She dumped the stolen evidence onto the passenger seat, the tape, the patient file, the photos. What they buried wasn't the bus, it was the program, and it wasn't the first time they done it. She flipped to the back of Janie's file. One last note: cycle complete, recommendation, silent site, reassign assets, terminate bed. Claire stared at the last word, terminate. Alan Baird had never disappeared. He'd been erased just like the others, just like Janie, unless she'd found a way to leave something behind, a clue, a warning, a voice. By morning, Eleanor Rutherford's house was gone. Claire had barely slept, her thoughts spiraling between fear and rage. She'd backed up every scan, every audio file, and every document she'd stolen the night before she was about to make her first call to a journalist she trusted in Boston. When the alert pinged on her phone, breaking house fire destroys historic woodpine property near Mornington Reservoir, she clicked the link. Authorities have not released the name of the deceased, but neighbors confirmed the property belonged to Eleanor Rutherford, a reclusive former school administrator. The fire, which began shortly after 4 a.m., consumed the home completely. Investigators are currently assessing the cause, but have not ruled out arson. Claire sat in silence, the phone trembling in her hand. It wasn't an accident. Someone knew she had been there. Someone knew what was left inside that house. She called the fire department, posed as a graduate student studying historical architecture. They wouldn't confirm details, but one phrase stuck: we found what looked like an archive room burned through, but no human remains on site, no body, no Eleanor Rutherford had disappeared again. Claire sat at her kitchen table, staring at the wall of evidence she'd reassembled from her backups: the GPS ping, the VHS tape, the medical files, the recorded session with Janie, the list of students redacted from the public record, and now a house fire conveniently destroying the last known link to the Bear Hollow experiments. Her laptop, Chanda reply from the journalist Elias Boone, an investigative reporter who had once exposed a corruption scandal in the Vermont State Police. Got your email. Sounds wild, but I'm listening. Let's talk in person. I'll drive out today. Relief swept over her. She'd finally found someone who would listen, someone outside Delp Pine, someone not afraid of what she'd uncovered. She emailed him everything, all the files, all the scans, every document, tape, and audio clip. She also gave him one name, Janie Della. The rest of the day passed in quiet anxiety. Claire walked the yard, checked her dad's locks twice, and slept in the living room, her phone clutched in her hand. She woke up to another email from Elias. Subject line: what the hell did you send me, Claire? This is big, like shut it down kind of big. I've started calling around, but I already got pushback. One source said Bear Hollow is still flagged internally off limits. I'll run with it, but you need to know. You're not the first person to ask about this. A guy named Hunter Bly tried 6 years ago. Freelance journalist vanished in the Catskills. I'm heading out now. Keep your phone on. If anything happens to me, your folder goes public automatically. Claire stared at the screen. She wasn't alone. She never had been. Others had tried. Others had been silenced. At 9:37 p.m., her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She picked up. Elias, but the voice wasn't his. It was a young girl's. Faint static laced Claire. She froze. Who is this? Don't stop. You're almost there. The voice was familiar. It's under the road where the bus stopped. We never got off. We just kept going. Claire's blood turned to ice. Janie, you're almost there. You have to finish it. The line went dead. Claire stared at the phone. The call history showed no number, no duration. She dropped the phone and backed away from the table. Was it real, a prank, her own unraveling, or had something, some part of Janie, found its way back through the cracks? She pulled out her map and traced the final stretch of gravel spur, the road where the bus had vanished. According to the documents from Rutherford's house, the final piece of the Bear Hollow complex was not above ground. The phrase kept repeating in every document: BHP sub/access, limited transfer via tunnel. The real chamber, the final test site, wasn't in the woods. It was under the road, exactly where the GPS had cut out Claire's final entry destination. Gravel spur beneath the old mile marker. Mission: confirm presence of tunnel subchamber. Objective: retrieve physical proof of site before it's sealed again. Backup sent to Elias Boone. Fail safe. Timed release to media of contact is lost. She packed the flashlight, camera, phone, and what was left of Janie's file. This time, She wasn't just following leads, she was going underground. The road was quiet. Gravel spur looked the same as it had weeks earlier, overgrown, deserted, forgotten. But Claire knew better now. She knew what lay beneath the cracked asphalt and moss-covered branches. She parked at the edge of the last known GPS ping, checking the coordinates 3 times. It was almost exactly where the bus had turned off the route, where the signal had stopped, where Janie's voice, real or not, had told her to look. Claire stepped out into the fading dusk, flashlight strapped to her wrist, her satchel packed tight with recording equipment, spare batteries, and 2 burner phones. One would remain in the car, uploading her GPS every 5 minutes. The other she would take down with her. A stone mile marker stood nearby, weathered, partially collapsed. She crouched near its base and cleared away the debris. There, a rusted metal hatch buried beneath years of pine needles and dirt bolted shut, but one hinge had cracked with rust. She gritted her teeth and parried. It gave with a screech like a scream. A stairwell descended beneath the road, and at the bottom a sealed door marked simply "Beige Sub." Was the airless dark, colder than before, deeper? Her flashlight flickered as she moved through corridors untouched by time, past metal bunkers and long-forgotten electrical boxes. Wires hung like vines, mold grew in jagged lines across the ceiling. She passed a door marked "Observation Room B," another "Sleep Study 3." And then she saw it, the bus parked in the center of a massive underground chamber, intact, covered in dust. Its windows were blacked out, as if it had never seen sunlight. Claire approached slowly, each step echoing. She circled the vehicle, hand trembling as she touched the rusted handle. The door creaked open. Inside, seats still stood, some slashed open, others wet with mildew, and on each seat a name tag handwritten in faded marker: Natalie B. Eric TK Mendes J. Delcourt. Claire moved to the back, heart pounding. On the final seat, a single paper note rested. "We weren't taken, we were kept. They tested the loop. Some didn't last. I remembered, that's why they marked me." She turned the note over, a drawing, the same one left at her door. A forest, a bus, a faceless figure watching, and in the corner, scrolled in tight, desperate handwriting underneath, "Forever, until someone saw us." Claire stepped off the bus and turned toward the far wall of the chamber. There, carved deep into the concrete, were the names, all 14, every child, each one engraved by hand over and over again, as if someone had been fighting to keep them remembered, even as the world tried to forget. Carrera Mendez, Eric Thomas, Janie Delcourt, Natalie Boyd, H. Collins, M. Rose Wynn T. Nguyen, J. Hart, C. Ellis, R. Becker, P. Dankler, L. Ford, B. Sims. Claire dropped her flashlight and raised her phone, snapping photos, every angle, every name, the bus itself, the chamber. It was all real. They were real. She whispered to the dark, "I see you." Back in the daylight, she uploaded everything: photos, audio, location data, and sent one last text to Elias Boone. "Found the chamber. They're all here." It was never a crash. It was a program. HP sharing files, now going to press. But the text never sent, no signal. And when she turned around, a man was standing by her car, dressed in blackface, expressionless. She froze. He didn't speak, just raised a phone of his own and typed. Claire's phone buzzed anew. "Message from an unknown number. Thank you. That's all we needed." The man walked away, disappearing into the trees, and Claire realized they had never lost the data. They had just needed her to reopen the door. Epilogue: 6 weeks later, Elias Boone received an envelope, inside a USB drive, on it everything Claire had collected. He tried to reach her, called every hospital, every station. No record, no police report, no trace of her father, hither. They were gone, just like the bus, just like the others. But now the truth had an audience, and for the first time in 18 years, the names had voices again. The bus that didn't return. If you want more twisted mysteries, dark fiction, and stories that stick with you, subscribe before someone makes this one disappear.